going to continue with absolute value by solving absolute value inequalities. So with this, you're going to see two different types of inequalities. You might see the absolute value of x is greater than 2. This says the distance between x and 0 is greater than 2. We're going to write that down. The distance between x and 0 is greater, or it could be greater than or equal to, than 2. All right. Wait for the smart board to catch up. So we could graph this inequality. The distance between x and 0 is greater than 2. That means that our answer is bigger than 2, so it's going to be shaded that way. Or we could go the other way too. Our distance has to be greater than 2. So here's 2 units away. This is 2 units. This is 2 units away. That means it's got to be smaller than negative 2. So this ends up being an or. It's shaded in opposite directions. So whenever you have a greater than or a greater than or equal to, your absolute value inequality is going to be an or. Okay, let's see what happens when you have a less than. The absolute value of x is less than, you can have less than or equal to 1.5. This says the distance between x and 0 is less than 1.5 units. The distance between x and 0 is less than, again, it could be less than or equal to 1.5. I'm going to add units to this. Maybe it'll make more sense. I'm going to add units to this one too. Okay, let's graph this one. X and 0 is less than 1.5 units. So here's 1.5, here's 0. It's less than. It's got to be smaller, so you're going to be shading to the left. Again, you can go 1.5 units the other way. It's going to be greater than this time equal. Think of it this way. The distance between these two numbers is less than 1.5, so it can't be shaded over here. So I'm going to be shaded between. If you have a less than or less than or equal to, it's going to be an and, always. Okay, so let's try some of these. Our instructions are going to be to solve the inequality and then graph the solution. Our first problem is x is greater than or equal to 6. Or I should say the absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 6. So you have to know how to read this. I'm going to make a number line. It might be easier to see. The distance between x and 0 is bigger or equal to 6 units. So it's got to be bigger than 6. So we're going to be shading to the right. The distance has to be greater than or equal to 6 units. So it's got to be bigger than those units. So it's got to be shaded this way. So to write your answer, you're going to say x is greater than or equal to 6 or x is less than or equal to -6. Those are your two answers. Okay, let's try. The absolute value So this distance is smaller than this. So it's going to be an and. Ands need to be combined into one inequality. You can't write simply two inequalities and write and in between it. X is greater than or equal to, X is less than or equal to 0.5. X is greater than or equal to negative 0.5. You can also think of writing this inequality as this is my smallest number, this is my highest number, X is sandwiched in between. Okay, why don't you give this a shot? I want you to try to solve and graph the absolute value of X is less than 8. Also try the absolute value of X is greater than 2/3. Solve and graph. Okay, we're going to move on. We have the absolute value of X plus 2 is greater than 1. Okay. Just like absolute value in equations, you're going to have two number answers. Realize up here that we had two number answers, and here we have two number answers. Even if it's an or an and, it's going to have two number answers. When you have absolute value inequalities, where the X is not by itself, you're going to have to make this one inequality into two. You're going to have to separate that. And you're going to do that the same way that we did yesterday with the equations, in addition to one step. The first problem is going to look the same. The second problem, you're going to switch the inequality symbol and make your answer negative. That's how you're going to get your two number answers. Once you do that, you're going to be able to solve both inequalities. X is greater than negative 1. And the other answer is X is less than negative 3. You cannot leave your answer like this. You have to decide if this is an and or if this is an or. Now at the beginning of the video I showed you how to tell if it's an and or. This says that this distance is greater than 1. That means it's an or. But if you can't tell if it's an and or just by looking at the original inequality, my suggestion to you is to graph the answer before you decide if it's an and or an or. So let's graph. Okay, so we have X is greater than negative 1. That means we're going to shade to the right. And X is less than negative 3. I see that this is shaded in opposite directions, so it's an or. To write my final inequality, all I have to do is write the word or in between those two. Okay, let's try another one. Let's try the absolute value of 2w minus 11 is less than 11. Again, based on what this inequality symbol is, the distance between X and 0 is less than 11 units. You should be able to tell if it's an and or an or. But if you can't right now, let's wait to graph it at the end. You need to split this into two separate problems. The first problem is going to look exactly the same. The second problem, you're going to switch the inequality symbol and then make your answer negative. I'm going to solve both inequalities. W is less than 11. W is greater than 0. Okay, again, maybe you can't tell if this is an and or an or, so you graph it. This says W is less than 11 and W is greater than 0. I see that this is shaded in between, so it's an and. To write my final inequality, I cannot simply just write the word and in between here like I did before. You're going to have to these two inequalities into one long inequality. So I have W is less than 11, and I also have W is greater than 0. The graph and this inequality is our answer. The absolute value of x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 7. Why don't you push pause and try that now? Okay, we're going to do this one together. I'm going to split this into two problems. X minus 5 is greater than or equal to 7. Then x minus 5 is less than or equal to negative 7. Solve both of the inequalities. You're going to want to graph it. Your graph is going to let you know if it's an and or an or. This says x is greater than or equal to 12. So I'm going to shade that way. X is less than or equal to negative 2. This is an or. So the graph is my answer, and then the inequality is also my answer because it's an or. All you have to do is put the word or in between the two inequalities. Okay, your turn to try the absolute value of x plus 3 is less than 8. Push pause and try it now. Okay, we're going to try some harder ones. Let's try the absolute value of 2x plus 3. And then we have minus 4 is less than or equal to 5. This works just like yesterday as well. You cannot split the inequality into two pieces until the absolute value bars are by itself on that left side. So my first step here is going to be to bring this 4 to the other side. Now that the absolute value bars are by itself on the left side, you can split the problem. I have 2x plus 3 is less than or equal to 9. 2x plus 3 is greater than or equal to negative 9. I'm going to solve both sides. X is less than or equal to 3. X is greater than or equal to negative 6. Some people have to graph and decide if this is an and or an or. X is less than or equal to 3. That means I'm shading that way. X is greater than or equal to negative 6. Greater than. This is an and, so I cannot leave my inequality like that. I know that x is less than or equal to 3, and it's also greater than or equal to negative 6. Next, we have the absolute value of negative 4x minus 5 plus 3 is greater than 9. Push pause and try this now. Okay, before we can split this, you have to get the absolute value bars by itself on the left side, so I brought the 3 over. Now that the absolute value bars are by itself, I can split the problem into two inequalities. The first inequality looks the same. The second inequality, you flip the inequality symbol and make your answer negative. Special happens here. You see that I'm dividing by a negative? When you divide by negative, you need to flip that inequality symbol. So I have x is less than. I'm also going to turn this into a mixed number. Negative 2 3/4. Work on the other side. Again, I'm dividing by a negative number, so I switch that inequality symbol. X is greater than 1/4. Okay. If you can't tell if that's a and or an or, you're going to want to graph. This says x is less than negative 2 3/4, and x is greater than 1/4. This is an or. So my answer would be the graph and this inequality. Okay. Last problem. I want you to try 3 times the absolute value of 5n minus 6 plus 8 is less than or equal to 13. Now would be a good time to write down any questions you may have.